Gardener. I am a Texas A&M AgriLife Extension certified Master Gardener volunteer. I belong to the Bexar County Master Gardener Association. This video is not endorsed, encouraged, supported by any Master Gardener Association, whether it's local, state, national, international. And this is not being done for any kind of profit, and I'm not at all. I'm not trying to monetize this. I'm not trying to be an influencer. What I'm doing is I'm going through the book, the Texas Master Gardener Handbook, and as I come across chapters, I'm trying to explain things that I have learned, not only in the handbook, but in my continued research. And for those who are interns, maybe this will help put the various chapters into perspective. And for those of you just watching, you want to learn how various aspects of gardening. So today, this is chapter 6 out of the Master Gardener Handbook. Talk about soil amendments. Specifically, I'm going to talk about the composting. The expression is that compost just happens. Well, compost doesn't happen. Compost is an intentional process that we put nature through. We're trying to imitate nature, just as potting soil imitates regular soil. A propagation, where we manually propagate things, imitates what nature does. And in nature, things decompose. Leaves decompose, dead limbs, trees decompose. They decompose because of bacteria. And when it decomposes, it forms a humus. When we make compost, we are forming a humus type product. Some people say that compost is humus. There's a lot of opinions on some of the stuff. I'm going to give you, generally speaking, what I've learned in studying compost, reading this massive $100 book on compost, and so here we go. Humus, as I said, happens in nature. Compost is something that humans make. And let me take a little break here. I want to enlarge my printer. My pointer, so that you can see things a little bit better. If you've never done this before and you give presentations, you go to your system preferences, push on display, and there it says pointer. Pointer, you can make it very large. Then you click out and you are ready to go. All right, so this is what we're shooting for. What is compost? Well, compost is, as I said, a manufactured product that we make. It utilizes air, water, browns, greens, and heat. And I'll go through each one of these. And this is what we're looking for. This is compost. We need some way to contain the ingredients that are going to make the compost. These are simply flats, pallets. And I just screwed them together. They come sort of pre-made. They allow for air in. There's some question on whether or not there should be a floor. If you have some sort of floor, you need to allow for air to flow through. If you don't have, mine is on the ground, and when I leave it on the ground, there are earthworms that eventually come there, but I'll get there. This is 3 by 3 by 3. We need it. That is a minimum, because we need to keep the pile together to make heat, and I'll go through that in a little bit. The maximum is 5 by 5. I'm 6 foot tall, and that means a 5-foot pile will go up to here, and that's really kind of hard to manipulate. So that's why for home gardeners, 5 by 5 is really about the biggest you want. Professionally, those piles will get 10 feet tall. But for home gardeners, really minimum 3 by 3, maximum 5 by 5. It can be wood, it can be wire, it can be anything you can. But thing is, we need to keep the ingredients together to create some heat. In a perfect world, this is the ideal. You put all your ingredients in here. In time, you'll turn it. I'll talk about that. You'll put it here. In time, you'll turn it. I'll talk about that. And you'll put it here. And it goes from here, which is limbs and twigs and whatever else. By the time it gets here, it looks like that first picture I showed you. There's perfect world, and then there's the real world. In a perfect world, you have all your browns and all your greens. You mix them, and the composting process begins. What happens is, the real world is we get our browns and greens, and then we throw banana peel in there. We throw in some extra leaves. And so Ideally, though, you want to have everything ready to go. Your browns, your greens, your compost pile, your enclosure, and you set it. And once you start the process, you don't add anything to it. That's in a perfect world. Okay, this is mine. I only have two. I don't have three because I don't have space for a third one. But you can see the filter system for my drip system, like get my rainwater capture, but that's a different presentation. All right, so this is the original pile, and what the composting process needs is air. There are microbes in the material, and they need air to breathe. And I use this fork. I went and bought it. A shovel works. It's really kind of difficult because a shovel kind of gets caught in the when the material mats together. The shovel has a hard time getting in. So I use this fork. It was worth for me. It was worth the money because when I buy compost or I buy mulch, that spreads it magnificently. All right, so you need air. You need water. And this is perhaps the biggest mistake I see in composting. What people will do is they'll build their pile and then says, well, it needs to have water. So they'll add water to it. Well, the water goes to the top of the pile, it falls around the side. The insides don't get wet. So I saw a video of this woman doing it absolutely perfectly. And what she did was, first off, she soaked hers. What I do is I have two green cans and I will put my browns in the green cans. Nothing else is in there. And I will fill those things full of water and they will sit for a day, maybe 2 days, because the leaves by nature are not going to absorb water. And so I soak mine. And so a couple of days later, when I use it, that is fully enveloped in water. It takes a lot of water to properly compost. Then you add your material into your bin and you add more water. It needs to be moist. It takes a lot of water to do composting properly, and the water needs to be done at the beginning. If you do it at the end, it's not going to be the interior part's just not going to get wet. All right, so it takes water and also the microbes in the composting materials, like they need air, they need water. Browns. We call browns, they're carbon based. And here you see a bunch of leaves. These are my grains. These are coffee grounds. Those are considered greens. And I'll explain more about browns and greens. But what browns means is every product using composting has a carbon and a nitrogen molecules. And the browns are high in carbon. Um, and I'll show you a chart here in a minute. So like a brown will be 400 parts of carbon to 1 part nitrogen. That's high, that's brown. Even 60 carbons and 1 nitrogen is considered brown. And I'll show you that chart. So browns, it part is the color, although it's really kind of a misnomer. But so you have browns and you have greens. Greens, this is coffee pucks from Starbucks. This is banana peels. I have no idea what some of that stuff is, but you see that water in there. It's kind of gross. But greens, interesting thing, greens are still high in carbon. They're just not as high as other products, and I'll show you that in a minute. So greens would be 25 to 1, 15 to 1. Still high in carbons, 15 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen, but 15 to 1 is considered green. 400 to 1 is considered browns. Greens, home composters do not use bones, meat, fish bones, no dairy products, no pest waste, charcoal ash, none of that stuff. Leaves, twigs, stuff along that line, turf grass, cuttings you do from your annual prunings, old, not disease, but old vegetable plants, that stuff is considered green. That stuff you can put in there. Basically speaking, when there's what's called a carbon to nitrogen ratio. It has been found through science research that if you have 30 parts of carbon to 1 part of nitrogen, that's the best combination for the composting process. That's the highest functioning for the composting process. It could be 40 to 1 or it could be 25 to 1, but just generally speaking, that's what that says right there. Basically speaking, we're shooting for a 30 parts carbon and 1 part nitrogen, and that's not easy to do. Some presentations you'll hear them say, and this should be a percentage sign. Sorry about that. It should be 70% carbon, 30% nitrogen. And if you read enough places, they'll all give you a different ratio. What this means is you have 7 parts carbon, so you can put in seven. Let's say you have a 1 gallon container, a pot container. So you put in 7 containers of leaves, then you put in 3 containers of Starbucks coffee. Some people say that's ideally what you want: 7, 3, 70, 30. It can be 50-50. I was reading, I don't remember which website it was. It's from one of the one of the land grant universities. They said it can be 50-50. 50% leaves, 50% coffee grounds. It really depends. Here's the key. If the pile smells, it has too much nitrogen. What happens is when you put out what makes raw fruit and vegetables smell is there are bacteria that are eating on that stuff, and when they eat that high nitrogen, they pass gas, and that gas, that ammonia smell, is what you smell as the bacteria are digesting and breaking wind. I don't know what insects, what you'd call it for them. If you look at your pile and it's not breaking down, I mean, let's say you make it's right now it's November. If you make a pile of leaves now and you come back in July and it's still a pile of leaves, it's too much carbon. You need the nitrogen to break it down. If it's starting to smell, you don't have enough carbon to help it out. So the ratios, it really depends on the products that you use, and I'll explain that in a minute. And if the pile is basically room temperature, um, that means it's going to be there's too much carbon to it at the beginning. I'll explain more about that in a minute. So here's some ratios for you. This is high carbon. Wood chips are 400 parts of carbon to 1 part nitrogen. That's considered brown high carbon. What a lot of us who use leaves, shredded leaves, are 60 to 1, 60% carbon and 1% nitrogen. That's considered high carbon. Now the greens, it's called high nitrogen. It's kind of a misnomer, but let's just go with it. Grains are high nitrogen. Vegetable scraps are only 25 to 1. Manures are 15 to 1. And you can see the manures is where you get that smell. It's because it's high in nitrogen. The vegetable scraps, they start to smell because they are, well, they're not, they're lower in carbon technically, but let's just say high in nitrogen because that's the language that's used in the composting presentations. Fruit waste is about 35 to 1. And remember I said ideally we're looking for that 30 to 1. And you'll hear in composting presentations, well, it should be this percentage to that percentage. But here's where it gets complicated. Let's say that you have a pile of sawdust and it's 325 parts of carbon to 1 part nitrogen. How much garden waste do you need to get sawdust down to 30 to 1? That math is outside of my league. That's why I say if it smells, it has too much nitrogen. If it's not breaking down, it's too much in carbon. If you want to get technical about it, here's your formula. I got this from the Cornell website. What's your ratio? Well, your ratio is you take the quantity of mass material, your leaves, and the carbon percentage of the leaves times 100 minus the moisture, the mass. All right, so you start to figure out it's getting a little complicated. That's why you'll hear percentages: 70-30, 60-40, 50-50. Put your products together and find out. I use leaves and primarily coffee grounds. And in a few months, I have compost. So find your favorite products and work with them. Otherwise, get out your calculator and you can figure out your own mass and your own. You can figure out. Let me see. I have 2 pounds of moist sawdust and I've got 20 pounds of manures. I'll let you figure that out. So basically speaking, if the pile smells, it's too much nitrogen. If it's not breaking down, it's too much carbon. If you have a big pile of stuff and it's room temperature, again, there's just too much carbon. There's nothing, the heat is not breaking it down. All right, so we have air, water, browns, greens, and now heat. Here's the fifth element we need in the science of composting. And here you have this great chart that I got from this website here. Here's your compost pile. Your browns and greens bring together. Here's the initiation phase, and this is about 68 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's more or less room temperature. It may be 90 degrees outside, but let's just say it's room temperature. The microbes from the carbons and the microbes from the nitrogens are going to start mixing together. They're going to start eating and they're going to start excreting. They're going to start tearing apart the leaves and the sticks and the coffee grounds, the banana peels and the watermelon rinds. They're going to start tearing all that stuff down. As they do it, their body heats up. Those are called psychrophilic, not psycho, psychrophilic. Philic is Greek for loving, and so psychro is cold loving. So when you first put it together, the psychrophilic bacteria and fungi microbes start to chew away, and their bodies warm up, and the temperature of the compost pile, which is why we have it in that 3x3 container. We need that heat. The temperature starts to rise. When it rises, that activates the mesophilic. Meso means medium loving. The medium loving temperature. So the psychro may come in here at 50 to 60. The meso start coming in maybe 70 to 100. And then come the thermo. Thermo means hot. Philic means love. Thermophilic is the hot loving microbes. And then these guys are eating these guys, are eating these guys. The fungus are eating the bacteria. It is a war going on inside that compost pile. And that kicks this temperature up as all this heat is being generated. And when you get up in here, 150 degrees, it's killing a lot of the seeds, a lot of the bacteria, a lot of the bad stuff that's going on, some of the pathogens. But we don't put garbage here. Don't put diseased plants in here because we don't know that this is killing all of that. Put clean stuff in your compost pile. What will happen is this is going to go up, and then it's going to start going down. And that's when we turn it. And I'll explain. Remember, I had those three bends. You put one or the other. When the temperature starts going down, you turn it, and it will start kicking up again, but not quite as high this time. And then it'll start going down, and you turn it again, it'll go up, and not quite so high this time, it'll start going down. And the way I know to turn it, if you want to be serious about a home composting, what you want to get is a thermometer. It's a composting thermometer. It's about 2 feet long. You put it deep into the compost pile, and see, this says, I can't remember that. I can't read that says, but this says active, and this says heat. And so the yellow means it's okay. The active means it's doing something. That's 100 to 130 degrees. This is 130 to 160. That's those thermophilic microbes. They are in there just really eating away, breaking down the leaves and the sticks, the browns and the greens. And what's going to happen is this temperature is going to start going down. And when this goes from 100, this is about 150. When this goes down to about 120, maybe 110 if I'm paying attention, I will use that fork I showed you, and I will fluff it up, and I will add water to it because I want to keep it moist because microbes need water. And this will go up again. It may not go to 150, maybe it goes to 140. And then as the pile starts to cool, the temperature goes down, and I will turn it again. I use my fork. Well, I don't go from bend to bend. I just kind of fluff it up a little bit. The leaves and everything on the outside, I need to get more on the inside so they can cook. The stuff on the outside, the stuff on the inside, I need to get on the outside to help break down those leaves that have been on the outside protected. And it'll go up again, and then it'll go down. When it stays pretty much in this area, this 80 to 100, when it just consistently stays there, then that tells me this pile is just about done with the composting phase, and now it needs to mature, which goes back to this maturation phase. And this is where a lot of people, they kind of lose it, even professionally. to me they lose it. What you in your compost, what you want is a really fine, dusty, humus material. And what you'll find in a lot of compost, the sticks and twigs, it hasn't fully broken down. This takes a while. This may take months. I will let my if I'm doing this in November, I'll make a pile this month. I might use this in June or July next year. And what I will find out is when that pile, and I'll go into this a little bit more in detail in a minute, when that pile is this tall and shrinks down to this size and it's room temperature, that tells me it's just about done. And what I'm going to find is earthworms are going to start coming through the bottom. Worms can't handle this. This is too hot. It'll cook them. But when it gets down here, earthworms start coming in. When I find earthworms there, that tells me it's done. So if you're serious, you want to be somewhat serious, you get a compost thermometer. So when does the compost finish? Well, the size is about 1/3 of the original size. So mine's 3 foot tall. It's going to be down to about a foot. The the pile of the temperature is the outside pile. Remember, if the temperature of the pile, the big pile is the outdoor temperature, it's not breaking down. But if your pile is 1/3 and you had the bacteria and the fungi from the browns, the greens chewing it up, and that pile is shrinking, 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 well, it's 1/3 the size, and now the pile temperature is the same as the outside temperature. There's a good chance it's almost finished. In a compost pile, ideally, you don't see the sticks and the twigs and the leaves and the banana peels. You don't see any of that. All you get is this great, rich humus material. It has a very fine texture. And as I said, the pile on the ground, there might be earthworms. And this is what we're looking for, even though you can still see some things in here. More and more material you buy commercially has sticks and twigs. The industry will tell you it's there for aeration. The problem is, when you put that wood material on the soil, it's going to take the nitrogen microbes away from the plants, and the nitrogen microbes will want to try to break down that wood, which is what they do in nature. So the problem in putting unfinished compost on the soil is going to rob the plants of nitrogen, because the nitrogen microbes are going to go break down the unfinished compost. So here, so what does it do? It feeds the microorganisms in the soil, which in turn feed the plants. It's called the poop loop. I say it's eat and excrete. You put your compost, and in part the properties of the compost chases the soil, but also the compost feeds the microbes who eat it, and they excrete what they don't need. It creates healthier plants, better soil. You get more diversity in your microbes. It can help reduce erosion because the soil is more absorbing. Here's my backyard. You see this really light green? That did not have any compost added to it. This area has had compost added to it. So I kept this picture to show you the effects of compost and no compost. So what does it do? This is my front yard. This was back in March of 2024. We had some rain. I can't remember what it was, but at least an inch. And this is my front yard, heavily composted. And see, look how deep those St. Augustine roots are. 1 inch of rain gave me 4 inches depth of moisture. This is so absorbing that 1 inch rain was sucked into 4 inches deep in the soil. And so that's one of the advantages of compost. So where's the best compost? What's the best compost? The best compost is what you make because you know what's in it. It's fresh and it takes months. Remember, I just talked about that. You can get bagged compost. It's the most expensive. It could have a shelf life. It's convenient. You go buy a bag, put it where you want to, stick it in the garage for a couple months and get it out. Bulk is much cheaper. Bag compost can cost you $12, $15 a bag. I can get a truck full of good vegetable-based compost for $15. And a truck is 1 cubic foot, and you buy this in cubic yard. This is you buying cubic feet, but you need a truck or access to one. All right, types of compost. You have vegetable compost, which is what most homeowners will grow. It offers a balance of nutrients, including nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. You have manure-based. That's going to be from the cattle, from the horses, chicken, whatever else, and human. Human-based manure is called biosolids. And if you get it from either bag or bulk yard, it has to be labeled biosolids. That stuff we flush down the toilet. Scientifically, there's no issues with it. Anecdotally, people say there's it's high in metals. It's the medications that we take and the antibiotics we take are in it. The science does not back that up. The theory about it does, but the science doesn't. Manure-based composts are highly rich in nitrogen, especially human manure. It's very high nitrogen. That's what I put all my front yard, put on all my yards. There is a vermicomposting, which is a special type of composting that uses worms. In South Texas, it's going to be red wigglers and red jumpers, and that's a whole different presentation. At the store, you're going to find mushroom, cotton burr, leaf mold, chicken, cattle. There's a mixed manure and vegetable. Basically they all do the same thing. They're going to release nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium into the soil. It's going to improve the structure of the soil. It's going to improve water retention and aeration. They all do the same. Before you buy any of this, don't say, well, my friend says mushroom works, so I'm going to go buy mushroom. Your friend may not know what they're talking about. Do some research on all of these. Go to Texas A&M, in your search engine, put in mushroom compost TAMU. See what A&M says about it. Or look up a land grant college. It could be Penn State, it could be Cornell, it could be LSU, Oklahoma State. See what Texas Tech says about it. But before you go buy chicken manure because your friend said it's a good thing to buy, research what you are going to buy. Is it worth the money? Is it really what you need? Because, like I said, compost, they all basically do the same thing. And is mushroom better than leaf mold? I don't know. You have to figure out the science on it. If you're using older bag compost, sometimes you have to be careful. You want to, if it's not the nurseries aren't going to appreciate it, but you want to smell it. If there's a bad odor to it, you need to get rid of it. Real quickly on mulches, mulch compost you add to the soil, mulch you put on top of the soil, and it protects it. It protects it from the wind and the sun. In South Texas, it's those evening breezes from the southeast. Now it's November, the winds start coming from the northwest. Compost protects the soil from the wind and the sun, which basically is pretty brutal, 14 months a year. Mulch holds in water because it's protecting the soil from the wind and the sun. It prevents weeds from growing in the soil. Now, weeds will grow in the compost in the mulch, but it's so loose. It's easy to pull weeds out of mulch. In soil, sometimes they get locked in the clay particles. It helps control erosion. I'll show you a picture of that, and it can add color. In time, in this sun, it's going to fade. So you can buy your pretty colors, but like I said, in time, the sun's going to bleach it out. Here's what I mean by protecting the soil. I did this in July one year. It was 90 degrees in the evening, and without the mulch, it was 90 degrees in the soil. With the mulch, it was 80 degrees. So what did mulch do? It lowered the temperature by 10 degrees. So which did you function better at, 90 degrees or 80 degrees? So the same thing does for the microbes in the soil and for the plants. No mulch, 90 degrees, a lot of mulch, 80 degrees. This is that holds moisture thing. This is a pretty steep decline here. And so I put in those rocks, and basically that's 100% mulch. I just fill it full of mulch. I put those plants in there to see if they'd grow. And right now, this thing is absolutely full of color. The plants just took over. And so anyway, if you notice, there is absolutely nothing on the sidewalk here because this mulch, a double shredded native, absorbed every ounce of water coming down the hill. This hill goes from here, it slopes down to here. So all the water gets funneled through here. And there's nothing here because the mulch absorbed it all. Helps control erosion. This is an issue I had when I moved in. I added a bag of expanded shale. Then I added an entire cubic yard of biosolids. And then I covered this mulch. So now this used to be a swamp. It used to have a little river running through it. But with all this stuff here, it just sucks it all. Look at all the luscious green in there. So mulches, they come in a variety. Pine bark was a flavor of the day, but bark does not absorb water, bark floats. And so back in the 80s, everybody had pine bark mulch all over the place until the water came and they came out their downspouts and it washed the pine bark down the street or out into their yard. It's pretty, but it doesn't float. And really, in here, pecan shell is beautiful mulch. Is that golden brown, but it doesn't absorb water. It floats away. So you can put in a beautiful bed of pecan mulch, pecan shell mulch, and with the first good rain, it's going to wash it all over the place. So if a mulch that is shredded absorbs better than mulch that is not shredded. Double shredded is the most absorbent. They'll take these trees, they'll run them through a grinder, and then that's single shredded. And then they'll run it through another grinder that's double shredded. And one place sells a triple ground. Ideally, this year's mulch breaks down and becomes next year's compost. Mulch maintains a stable environment with the sun and the wind. Color mulch has maybe 4 years, but it kind of ruins the idea if this year's mulch becomes next year's compost. And there's some concern about the quality of wood that's used in the dye in the colored mulch. When I talked to a maker of this, they said it's a soy-based dye, so it's not bad for the soil. Bulk comes in single shredded. There is a living mulch, or they call it composted mulch. It's 2-for-1 product. They put compost mulch together, and they'll call it a living mulch or a composted mulch. And then there's free and commercial. Free is what the city has. Commercial is what you buy. You can bag. You can buy pine, cypress, native. You can get in colors. You can get all sorts of things. Here is this is single shredded. See those long pieces? This is double shredded. See those finer pieces in there? This will absorb water better than this. This is the free stuff that I got from the city. There is going to be some pollutants in there. This is going to take a lot of nitrogen away from the plants to break this down. But this is what you get in the free stuff. You just have to understand it's free, and you're going to have some stuff in there. So you might use this maybe in walkways or in places you don't want it to be seen. This is what we want: double shredded native mulch. And I think that's it. So I hope this has helped explain compost process and the value of mulch. As I said at the beginning, composts all do basically the same thing. They add nutrients, they change the structure of the soil, and they make the soil more absorbent. So as you read through chapter 6, hopefully this makes some sense. But if all the stuff in chapter 6 talks about compost, this is the presentation I give you.